Hi, my name is Andrew Hall, and I teach biology at Glen Allen High School. Sorry I can't join you guys tonight. I have parent-teacher conferences, so I really wish I could see everybody else's stuff. But here's what I did to implement inquiry into my lessons this year to become a better teacher. I used to be what I would consider a 50-50 teacher. I would pepper in some inquiry-based ideas here and there, where time and ability and my thoughtfulness suited, but it wasn't a platform I worked from. I really felt pressed by the need to give kids a lot of structure in college prep level classes. I was also pressed by the time to get all this SOL content done. So kids did a lot of labs after already learning the content, and there was so much structure they didn't need to do a lot of thinking. Here's an example of that. An old lesson I did on enzyme activity had as the goal of seeing denaturing an enzyme in action and then explaining the results as a product of change in enzyme shape. Kids had already learned everything about enzymes and denaturing. They already knew what denaturing was. They all got the same procedures, and the emphasis was sort of a cookbook approach to getting sure and certain results. I wanted the results to work perfectly so that there was no uncertainty. Kids conducted the lab in groups, but they didn't have to collaborate to design their own procedures or to present their findings and really make sense of it themselves. In a new lab, my goal was to use the 5E model and the activity before content strategies to teach about enzyme activity. We first started with a lesson using a foldable $1 bill catalyst, where as I taught about catalysts, kids had to perform a hands-on activity and then relate everything we did to their hands-on activity. The next day, I posed the question about why do organisms need to maintain homeostasis of pH and temperature. This was to engage them in the lesson. Then to explore this, students had to design their own lab in groups of 3 or 4 students to investigate the effects of changing pH or heating an enzyme. So they wanted to see what the effects of either pH change or temperature change were on enzyme activity. As you can see, they had to design some of their own procedures. They had to come up with their own independent and dependent variables, define constants, determine what was a control, form a hypothesis. They had to create their own data tables. I'd always given students their own procedures. I'd already given them data tables. So as they collected data, they had to figure out a meaningful way to organize themselves. Then, after the activity was finished, students had to develop a 3 to 5 minute presentation about their lab, what they did, why they chose to do their activity that way, what their results were, and why their results were meaningful. So they had to actually think through what they were doing in a way that they could clearly explain it. They had to come up with a graph to clearly explain what they did and succinctly show their results. Then, after we collected everybody's collaborative data as a class, students developed their own explanations for the lab results, why the catalase enzyme generally worked better at a neutral pH and at lower temperatures rather than being heated. Only after this did I follow with a brief 10-minute lecture on protein folding and denaturing. Students were then able to go back, evaluate their previous explanations, and revise them. Probably don't have time to read it through everything here, but I wanted to show examples of how students had to initially think about why homeostasis is important, and then apply their knowledge of enzymes to that. Likewise, students had to come up with initial explanations for their results, then revise them in light of having learned about the content of enzymes, protein folding, and denaturing. What I really like about this is that rather than having my lesson plans be a lot about what I'm doing as a teacher, I can talk about what students are doing. They're the ones who are really engaged, and I really felt that this unit. Students had the room to be flexible, to make mistakes, to have time to do repeated trials. That's just how science works. We have to do science in order to learn science content. We have to be engaged in the process to learn the content. I like that students had to think about what they were doing in presenting their data, in defining their variables, in designing their experiments. They had to think about what data were relevant or what the results really mean. And that was something that they didn't have the freedom to do before. In addition, as a side benefit, I've noticed that discipline problems have gone down a lot because students have responsibility. They have to think more, they have to be engaged more, and if they're not participating, they are getting into trouble. Thank you guys for your time. I wish I could be there, and good luck to everybody else as you implement inquiry the rest of the year.